It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, John Palfreyman from Palfreyman Ventures. John founded Palfreyman Ventures last July after spending 20 years with IBM, the last 2 spent delivering blockchain customer projects across industry. And in addition, we're working with Sheffield University on the blockchain transportation project. John also provides consultant and advisory services to startup companies and fast-growing organisations. So, John, please.
Toby, thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here in Milton Keynes. It's always a lovely place to visit. I was just up the road in Cranfield back some 40 years ago doing a postgrad, and you'd be amused to know that at that time Milton Keynes was pretty much a muddy sort of set of roads that we used to drive through and get the car dirty. So it always holds sort of very special memories to come back. But it's great also to talk at such a vibrant conference, and thanks very much to the TSC guys for inviting me to kick things off with a sort of slight challenge. They said, can you explain all about blockchain in about 12 minutes? So I'm going to do my level best, but I'm also going to be around for the rest of the day in the panel in the afternoon, so we can actually talk about the stuff that in more detail in the breaks and things. So this is what I'm actually going to cover, just 2 topics. I'm going to really very quickly run through what blockchain is, very much from a business point of view. I'm not going to go into deep mathematics or technology in the 12 minutes available, but I'm actually going to hopefully explain how blockchain can make a difference in business. And then in the second part of my presentation, I'm going to look specifically at intelligent mobility and the future of transportation, and actually start to touch on the benefits that blockchain can bring in those industries, and which really is a warm-up act for my close colleague and friend Lenny, who's going to sort of go on and explain a little bit more about the project that we did at Sheffield, where we sort of collaborated together to look at how blockchain would impact the industry in more detail. So first of all, but very quickly, back to basics. Businesses never operate in isolation. They always work with other businesses or other organisations or regulatory authorities or governments or banks, and they always work together in a business network. The business networks are absolutely fundamental to the operation of business, and indeed wealth has actually grown by the flow of business services, the flow of assets or services across the business network. So the business network is key and quite fundamental, as are the concept of assets. Now assets flow across businesses and basically really break down into 2 fundamental types. There are tangible assets like your house or your car, or intangible assets like a piece of digital music or a mortgage. These assets flow around the business network to generate wealth as time goes on. Now, since many, many centuries ago, the ledger's actually been fundamental to the recording of what assets are owned by a particular business. All the businesses have a ledger. They're updated when an asset transfers in or out of the business, usually according to a contract, which can either be quite simple or a little bit more complicated, as we're showing here on the slide. But first of all then, I haven't talked so far about blockchain, but let's fix that. This slide is the one to remember if you get caught in an elevator by someone or a family member ask you, what is blockchain? And you've got about 30 seconds to explain it. These are really the fundamental points to look about blockchain. In business terms, it's a way for a business network to share a ledger, to actually have a common ledger, to using privacy services to actually engender trust around the business network in the sharing of that ledger and the usage of that ledger, and to make sure that all transactions across the network are trusted by all. Also with a shared business process, a business process that's agreed by all the members of the business network, distributed around the business network, and is actually, again, further adds to the trust across the business network. Now, before blockchain came along, as I said, organizations have been working together for centuries, exchanging goods and services and moving transactions around without a blockchain. And over the last several hundred years, we've been increasingly improving that service, obviously more recently digitizing that way of operating. But it's shown pretty much here. The key characteristics of this is all the different businesses have their own copies of the ledger. The ledger's updated, as I said earlier, every time an asset flows in or out of the business, but it's done according to the own individual business processes of that organization. Now, the good thing about this is it's tried and tested. It's been around for some time. Everyone knows how it works. Bad things are listed along the bottom of the slide. It's inefficient because the business process is actually repeated by each of the different organizations and can be subtly different. It's expensive in that, for example, some of the financial organizations we talked to when I was doing projects with IBM would tell us that 20% of their costs are spent on internal and external audit. So, you know, this is an incredible amount of money, which really come from the fact that the way that the transactions are done across the business network. But it's also vulnerable to either cyber attack, to fraud, or just to error. It's very difficult to recover from that if you're in one of the major nodes of the system. So blockchain can bring to this sort of party a different way of operating. In a blockchain world, all the different businesses in the business network share a ledger, and privacy services determine who can actually see what from that ledger. So for example, if Lenny and I are transacting, if we're moving goods between us, she and I will be able to see all the details of that transaction. But if Charles is in the business network, I don't know where Charles is, he's hiding somewhere, if he was in the business network and we didn't give him permission, he wouldn't be able to see the details of the transactions that are flowing between us, unless he took on the role of an external auditor, and we could actually then open up full details to him for a period of time using the smarts within blockchain. So that's effectively what happens in a blockchain-enabled business network. And the 4 words across the bottom here, well, I don't have much time to drill into them, are fundamentally important when you look for the sort of use case or business challenge that blockchain can help you solve. The first one is consensus. It's key for the members of the business network, the core business network members, to be able to say when a transaction's valid. The next one is provenance. The way that the blockchain's formed over time means that you've got a complete audit trail, a complete history of who's done what, who's owned what over time, which is actually very handy, very useful. Immutability means that basically the whole process is tamper-proof. Privacy services mean that it's really impossible to go in and change a record once it's been committed to the blockchain, unless you back it out. So you basically you issue a reverse transaction, and again with a complete audit trail of that. And finality basically means that there's one system of record, one system of proof across the business network, again enhancing trust in that network. Now, obviously lots of people have heard of Bitcoin. I think unless you've been hid under a very big stone for a long time, people will have heard of Bitcoin. And there's lots of confusion around about Bitcoin and blockchain. It's actually very straightforward, and I stole this slide from an early conference I went to on blockchain. But the key thing is, blockchain, big B, is not Bitcoin, little b. The difference is, Bitcoin was actually the first use of blockchain technology in anger. It was used in a specific use case, a cryptocurrency, where one of the key design points was actually to make the transactions as anonymous as possible. Hence the use of Bitcoin for various nefarious techniques such as bribery or exchanging goods over the dark web. However, blockchain is totally different. Blockchain is the technology that underpins Bitcoin, but it's got much wider use. It can be used across multiple industries to exchange a vast number of different assets. We're not just talking about currency. We could actually track other types of services, whether they're digital representation of goods or whether they're actually physical goods around a supply chain using blockchain. So much broader assets, and the sort of set of use cases that we're most interested in is really in the business network, where you know everyone in the business network, and there is a degree of trust of those members in the business network. It could be low for certain members of the network, but trust does exist, and we don't mind knowing who we're trading with. In fact, we want to know who we're trading with. So those are the sort of use cases, the vast number of use cases that really lead to these amazing claims of growth and market size that we've seen in the present that Toby referred to. So very quickly, in the 4 minutes and 4 seconds that I've got left, I'm going to talk about the relevance of blockchain to intelligent mobility. And this really is, as I say, a lead-in into Lenny's presentation, who's going to come up and talk next. So what we did on the project where we worked together with where I worked together with Sheffield University and TSC, we actually looked at the segmentation of the intelligent mobility. We actually said it splits down into 3 subsectors: connected and autonomous vehicles, freight and logistics, and mobility as a service. And we got subject matter experts together in intelligent mobility and said, hey, what are the 3 biggest challenges that each of these sectors face? And we've listed them here. So we actually then carried that forward and said, okay, well, what's blockchain value? Let's look across industry and look at how blockchain is making a difference, not just in intelligent mobility, across all the different industries. That's this slide. So again, just illustrating some of these very, very quickly by some of the public domain projects that I was involved in IBM. If you look at the cost point, removing cost of overheads and intermediaries, IBM did a really exciting project with the Dutch Vehicle Registration Authority, where they registered electric bikes. The benefit there was if the bike was stolen, it was much easier for the insurance and the police and everyone to work together to get the goods back. If you look at reducing risk, another exciting project that we did was tracking diamonds from the point that they were mined all the way through to a jeweler's and making sure that there wasn't pollution along the diamond supply chain. And again, this is an excellent way of actually sort of showing how you could take risk out of quite a high-profile supply chain. But then the trust. The trust is particularly important, and I think probably for me the most important facet that blockchain can provide. It can provide a trust in a network where you might not know everyone completely, but you do know them, but you might not trust them completely. And there are some interesting ones on the trusted supply chain work, for example, that IBM's doing with Maersk Corporation is very relevant there. So how do we take these same four characteristics of blockchain and apply them to intelligent mobility? Now again, just for the shortness of time, I'll just go through a couple of these. If you look at cost of trade is something that, again, many industries are actually looking at taking out with blockchain. And through sharing business processes around the different members of the business network who might be jointly providing transportation systems, you can actually reduce the cost of trade. If you look at risk, supply chain management and actually tracking goods and services across a supply chain is one of the amazing cross-industry use cases of blockchain. Very, very relevant in intelligent mobility, both in the supply chain part, but also looking at composite systems of systems. Now the final one, trust, in the 1 minute that I've got left, is really, this will allow large and small organizations to come together in the provision of things like mobility as a service in a way that will improve the trust for the user, the end user of that service to us, and allow the different organizations to work together. As I say, I've gone through that incredibly quickly, and I wouldn't mind in any of the breaks elaborating on those comments, or indeed any of the Sheffield team would be pleased to do that. And we're blessed to have all the different members of the project here today. But thanks very much for putting up with me for 12 minutes. I'm very happy to interact on this either physically in the rest of the event or socially via the different social media channels after the event. And I hope that my speed of delivery hasn't detracted too much from the amazing potential that blockchain brings to intelligent mobility. And I finished 15 seconds early, so thank you.